No weapons manufacturer intends to release a bad product, and certainly none expect their craftsmanship to be labeled with a scathing accolade like worst firearm ever made. Yet, whether by design or accident, there are plenty of bad firearms out there, some so dubious that they have earned a permanent place in history. From models that suffer from poor performance and unreliable firing mechanics to those with questionable safety that poses a serious threat to the user, every bad firearm signals that someone somewhere made a series of poor decisions. Then there are firearms like the notorious ZIP-22, an example of all the design flaws rolled into a single ergonomically bizarre and perpetually malfunctioning disaster. The ZIP-22 is a now disgraced semi-automatic bullpup pistol that many consider the worst of its kind ever made. While there are arguably other firearms that might more fittingly earn the worst ever title, it is the confusing story of how the pistol came to be and how it ultimately sank an entire once respected company that gives the ZIP-22 its particularly distasteful reputation. So let's take a closer look at the pistol to understand just how bad it really was and to make sense of how such a manufacturing catastrophe could occur. Like many ideas that ended in disaster, the ZIP-22 began with the best intentions. It was conceived by a firearms enthusiast determined to create something groundbreaking. Had the pistol been a success, it might have ushered in a new era of affordable, safe, and accessible handguns, further enhanced by a modular design that allowed for extensive customization. Yet, despite these noble beginnings, the 2013 release of the ZIP-22 was met with bewilderment at best and outrage at worst, leading to the scrapping of the entire production line after just a single year. So how did it all go wrong, especially when the firearm was designed by someone who not only ran a successful production factory, but had also earned a reputation for unparalleled quality? Well, to fully understand the story of the ZIP-22, we need to delve into the history of the US Firearms Manufacturing Company, or USFA, and its CEO, Douglas Donnelly. Before the ZIP-22 catastrophe, USFA was primarily known for reproducing iconic single-action firearms, especially those made famous by Colt. USFA's commitment to authenticity was so strong that its production line was set up under the Blue Dome in 1993. The Blue Dome here refers to the eye-catching structure that still survives today, having once stood above the east building of the original Colt Armory complex. The dome itself was refurbished following a fire in 1864, and today the surrounding complex houses various cafes and offices. However, USFA wanted to be more closely associated with Colt, embracing a marketing strategy that positioned their company as the heir to the legacy of the iconic American manufacturer. As a result, USFA referred to its products as coming from under the Blue Dome, even though nothing of Colt remained in the complex. For anyone with even a basic knowledge of American culture, the name Colt Manufacturing Company is familiar. Colt mass-produced some of the most recognizable American firearms from the mid-1800s through World War I, etching its brand into history for better or for worse. By the time USFA was established, original Colt firearms were little more than antiques, so for enthusiasts eager to own a piece of history, the best option was a reproduction. Thus, recognizing the demand, USFA set out to create virtually identical reproductions of the most iconic Colt firearms, including the Colt M1911, the Colt Lightning Carbine, and the absolutely iconic Colt Single-Action Army Revolver. These reproductions were never intended to be cheap knockoffs. CEO Douglas Donnelly promised never to cut corners or accept inferior materials, committing squarely to quality above all else. And to make this happen, USFA established an old armory custom workshop that was as close to the original as possible, using authentic materials and handcrafting every part down to the individual screw. None of it was cheap, the process was labor-intensive, but the intention had always been to offer reproductions that were head and shoulders above the competition. More than that, USFA leveraged its cutting-edge workshop to offer additional extras like hand engravings, fine metal plating, case hardening, and other finishing flourishes, catering to a gun enthusiast community willing to pay upward of $2,000 per order. It may seem that USFA was making a fortune, but that probably wasn't the case, a point that will be oh so important in a moment. Now, where does the ZIP-22 come in? Well, there is some debate on how the USFA transitioned from producing high-quality reproductions to an ill-fated original design, but most point to Douglas Donnelly as the prime suspect. What is known for sure is that USAF became as well known for its excellent work as it did for proposing big ideas and pitching unusual designs, only for the initial momentum to die down as quickly as it had started. Most of the original ideas pitched weren't going to find much traction with a connoisseur firearms market anyway, including a conceptualized but never produced shot pistol and authentic reproduction firearms with completely inappropriate color schemes. Each idea was met with general disinterest, a not surprising result in a market concerned with authenticity rather than novelty. What the situation did make clear, however, was that USFA, or most likely Donnelly himself, was eager to branch out and experiment, but couldn't find the right angle. Donnelly eventually committed to one of his original ideas, and many have suggested that finances ultimately prompted him to do so. The pristine reproductions, while lucrative to some extent, were so time-consuming to manufacture that only a handful could ever be produced in a given timeframe. Profits were hampered as a result, and USFA remained constrained by the high standards it had insisted on. So, after a few years of searching for a new avenue of business, Donnelly took the plunge, introduced the world to his ZIP-22 modular pistol, and the firearms community has been trying to understand how it went so wrong ever since. The now notorious unidentified firing object video was uploaded to YouTube on June 4, 2012 by a John Smith, obviously Donnelly in disguise. The short video provides a first look at the ZIP-22, showcasing it at a firing range as it discharged a few rounds in quick succession. In the description, the disguised Donnelly requested that viewers share the video to help identify the pistol, saying, "Pass this video around, and if anyone can ID the gun, it would be great because I'd like to buy one. Looks like a mini bullpup. Seems like a high-quality, compact, futuristic modular pistol." Donnelly provided some of the most searing foreshadowing anyone could ask for, stating, "It does not jam like my other 22s. Meanwhile, the highest rated comments on the video hinted at what was coming. This is the first time I've ever seen the Zip fire more than a single round before promptly jamming. The second most highly rated comment added, "This must have been a pre-production prototype with a steel bolt or something. No way, this was a factory gun reliably running like this with no malfunctions." Now, we're about to examine the catastrophic failings of the ZIP-22, but before we do, it's important to remember that Donnelly had good intentions and an admirable core design philosophy, even if everything ultimately ended in disaster. First and foremost, after being beholden to high-quality standards and precision parts in his earlier work, Donnelly took the opposite approach with his personal creation. The ZIP-22 was made almost entirely from polymer, cast plastic, even incorporating some of the key internal components. This choice of inexpensive material reduced the cost of each unit to under $200, thereby opening up USFA to a much broader market. Second, the modular design of the ZIP-22 allowed enthusiasts to transform the base configuration into virtually anything they desired. The manual proposed a short-barreled rifle modification that adapted the base into a two-handled rifle while also providing internal storage for a medical kit. Another modification suggested the pistol could be attached to the underside of a carbine, similar to an underslung shotgun, allowing the ZIP-22 to serve as a backup during magazine changes and other emergencies. The top of the pistol came standard with a simple notch and blade sight, but it could be swapped out for a Picatinny or scope rail, allowing advanced optics to be easily mounted. There was even a clip modification that attached to the side of the pistol, enabling gun owners to belt carry the weapon for quick storage. The potential was clear, and there's no denying that Donnelly was onto something interesting. But with that said, it's time to burst the bubble and get into why the ZIP-22 was such an unmitigated disaster, starting with how the pistol was even supposed to fit into a user's hands. Right from the start, the ZIP-22 lacked a proper pistol grip. It featured only a flat butt plate for the palm, leaving nothing but air for the ring and little fingers to grasp. The design called for the middle finger to fit into a grip hole, leaving the index finger free to operate the trigger. None of this was particularly comfortable. Most users, except perhaps those with exceptionally large hands, would likely experience cramps within minutes. While some issues might have been mitigated by the plan's modifications, none of which ever went into production, as it came out of the box, the ZIP-22 was an ergonomic embarrassment. So why was it also poorly thought out? Well, that's likely because Donnelly prioritized making the pistol eye-catching over ensuring that it was practical and user-friendly, overlooking the crucial difference between something that looks interesting and something whose aesthetics translate into sound ergonomics. But strap in, we are only just getting started. Next up is the brass ejection port. When holding the gun in what appeared to be the correct manner, the user's hand would be dangerously close to the ejected brass. It was even possible to accidentally cover the port entirely while trying to get a more comfortable grip, an inevitability given the pistol pistol's inherent discomfort. Conversely, if the user happened to be left-handed, the design did seem to make more sense, though there was never an option for left or right-handed alternatives. Even for a left-handed user, however, if they happened to use the previously mentioned belt clip, the bulky accessory made it difficult to even bring the index finger to the trigger. Starting off poorly, and moving on to one of the most criticized aspects of the ZIP-22, let's examine its legitimately baffling cocking mechanism. Two trapezoidal rods protruded from the front of the gun, running nearly the entire length of the barrel, one marked zip load and the other zip restrike. After inserting a magazine of the Ruger 10-22 variety, the idea was to push the zip load rod into the body of the pistol, thereby feeding the first round and priming the firing mechanism. The restrike rod was intended as a backup, allowing for the resettling of the mechanism should it fail. At first glance, you can probably see the problem. The user was required to place their fingers dangerously close to the barrel when chambering a round. This was problematic enough if the gun had been firing and the barrel was hot, but even more so because there was a real risk of accidentally blowing off a finger. These inherent risks were multiplied exponentially by the fact that the user would be fiddling with the cocking mechanism constantly, especially given the firearm's other major flaw. It jammed so often that it almost never worked at all. Pinning down an exact percentage of how often the ZIP-22 jammed is difficult, but a quick look at some online videos shows YouTubers barely able to get through a single magazine without encountering malfunctions. We estimate the failure rate to be around 40 to 45%, though some estimates go as high as 60%. The bottom line is that the ZIP-22 was virtually unusable, and while some might forgive its ergonomic flaws, there is no forgiving a gun that was almost guaranteed to jam within seconds. As to why the ZIP-22 jammed so frequently, it came down to a long list of poor design decisions paired with simplistic mechanisms and cheap parts. The core of the gun was blowback operated, meaning that the system cycled using the expanding gases of a discharged round. Blowback firearms are not inherently more prone to jamming, assuming they're designed intelligently, but the ZIP-22 had no extractor or ejector. This meant that the system relied solely on expanding gas to eject the spent case and cycle in a new round. In a nutshell, even an amateur engineer would have suggested that the system was unreliable. Which at last brings us to the question hanging over the entire ZIP-22 debacle. A question that fans of USFA have been asking for years. What had Donnelly been thinking, and how had he managed to screw up this badly? The ZIP-22 was unsurprisingly rejected across the board, receiving horrific reviews and selling very poorly. The few positive remarks noted that the gun had good range, minimal kickback, and that its modular design held some promise. However, any optimism was quickly drowned out by refund demands and suspicions that the entire product was nothing more than an ill-conceived, poorly executed scam. Although there is no definitive record of events, it is hard to imagine Donnelly taking a factory-fresh ZIP-22 to a firing range and being satisfied with its obvious flaws. His company was built on precision-crafted products, so it seems absurd that he could have overlooked the frequent jams, even if he had been willing to tolerate the poor ergonomics and safety concerns. Some speculation still persists that an original, much more finely honed ZIP-22 prototype once existed, only to be stripped down later in an effort to reduce production costs. As some have noted, the ZIP-22 in the unidentified firing object video managed to fire multiple shots without malfunction, and Donnelly even remarked, "It doesn't jam like my other 22s." This suggests that the prototype may have performed better with reliability problems introduced later through poorly conceived, hastily implemented last-minute changes. While this remains speculation, such theories paint a clearer picture of how a successful CEO could fumble this so badly. Speculation aside, the failure of the ZIP-22 forced USFA into a difficult position. With a fortune lost and customer faith waning, the best solution would have been to return to what they did best, manufacturing cold reproductions. That is exactly what USFA would have done if not for Donnelly staking the entire future of the company on the success of the ZIP-22. So confident was he in its potential that he offered the entire Old Armory custom shop as collateral, including expensive computer numerical control or CNC automated machinery and other highly specialized tooling equipment. All of it was sold, and the funds were sunk into a new production line designed for working with polymer. As it turned out, the existing machinery at USFA was not capable of working with plastic. Despite its proven success in producing other products, Donnelly decided to trade it all in and lean 100% into the ZIP-22. He did not act hastily. He assumed that after a few years of raking in profits, he would simply buy back the old Armory custom shop along with its original customer base. In theory, not a bad idea. Had everything worked out, USFA would have been in a much stronger financial position than ever before. Of course, things didn't work out. The Zip 22 is estimated to have sold only a few hundred units when it would have needed to sell tens of thousands merely to break even. It remains unclear what ultimately became of the Zip 22 production machinery or whether any attempt was made to buy back and re-establish the old Armory custom shop. Ultimately, with most of its skilled craftsmen gone and its reputation in tatters, the company officially closed its doors for good in 2017. Interestingly, however, the disaster of USFA was not entirely in vain. The company left a lasting impact on the firearms industry. The Colt reproductions it produced are now selling for a small fortune. They remain widely regarded as incredibly high quality, highly desirable, and the best available recreations of Colt classics. Some of the company's products even appear in films such as 3:10 to Yuma, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, and Shanghai Noon. The demise of USFA also prompted the successor to the original Colt manufacturing company, now owned by the Czech-based Colt CZ Group, to rise to the challenge and begin manufacturing their own single-action Colt reproductions. Many still argue that USFA and Doug Donnelly produced the best reproductions, but like the original Colt, USFA is now lost to time forever.